everybody, again today. So glad that you're here, especially if you are here for the first time. Or maybe you're coming back after a while, you hadn't been here in a while, and you're just kind of jumping in right in the middle. And so just want to let everybody know right off the bat, we are right in the middle of a series that we're calling Get Rich Quick. And so you'll have to stick around for just a few minutes to figure out kind of what we're talking about, why we're calling it something crazy like that. But this is a series just to kind of be above board about everything, to let you know kind of where this came from. This is based on a series that came out of North Point Community Church in Atlanta, Georgia. Pastor Andy Stanley, just a few years ago, taught through this series of messages where this idea came from. And it was about this time of the year when he walked through all of this. But it was their Be Rich campaign, which they do every year. This is an annual thing, and it's similar to what you just heard about our Christmas offering. It's just kind of end of the year giving and where all of that can be kind of focused and go. And so it's just like that. At the end of the year, we want to be extravagantly generous because it's kind of a season when people are sort of thinking about others anyway. And we kind of, begin to serve and give in ways that maybe we don't the rest of the year. And so we just try to focus that energy a little bit through our Christmas offering and through our end of the year giving. And that's why we have a serve day coming up next week. So you can be a part of that. You can serve at one of our local community partners. Some of the ways that we do outreach here in the community, instead of kind of reinventing the wheel in all different areas, we just jump on board with partners and organizations in the community that are doing an awesome job. And so, and as I said in the video, you can find out more about that even now on our website, and just type in Christmas after ridgechurch.com, and you can learn more about those organizations there. You can even give there. So, but we just we want to look at a passage of Scripture. This is where we began last week. That the Apostle Paul was really writing a letter to his cohort, his friend in ministry, Timothy, and he was encouraging Timothy in different ways and things that he wanted him to remember and things to do. And then he was commanding him, hey, let me just remind you, when you bump up against some rich folks, when you bump into rich people, this is what I want you to tell them. And he had some instructions. These are things I want you to tell rich people. And there's reasons for that, because really Paul was always taking the teachings of Jesus and kind of fleshing them out and helping us figure out what they mean for our everyday lives. And the problem is, when you read a passage of Scripture like this, like in 1 Timothy chapter 6, we read through this last week, is we don't think we're rich. Nobody thinks they're rich. And so we kind of skip over passages like this. We think, well, I'm not rich, and so this doesn't apply to me. Well, this just can't mean me because, obviously, I ain't rich, right? And nobody here would say they were rich, because that's how we do. And we say it because rich is always more than we have. And here's the thing. I would be willing to bet that if I was to talk to each one of you and your families and get us, sit over a cup of coffee, and we would discuss these things, you would have kind of a number, an idea, a thought out there as to what rich really would look like. But it wouldn't be what you actually have now. It wouldn't be your net worth, regardless of your gross income, regardless of your liquid assets, regardless of the things you could buy and sell, regardless of those things. You don't think you're rich because nobody thinks they're rich. Nobody would jump up and say that. And I don't know what that is. But because when it comes to other parts of who we are, nobody minds admitting these things, quiet people don't mind admitting, hey, I'm quiet, I'm introverted. Loud people definitely don't mind admitting they're loud, right? Athletic people don't mind admitting they're athletes. You've got creative people who don't mind admitting they're creative. But for some reason, when it comes to wealth, nobody says I'm rich. And so it doesn't matter. Numerous polls and studies have been done. It doesn't matter if you make $50,000, $150,000, or $550,000 a year. We always think that rich is really more than we have now. Well, it's always that's somebody else. And that's really what we think. It doesn't apply to me. It's always somebody else that it applies to. Rich is got to be referring to somebody else. And while I doubt anybody in here, if I was to ask the question, I doubt anybody in here would stand up and say, I am rich. Wait, you've missed the boat, I'm rich. I doubt there's anybody in here who would do that, but I guarantee you everybody in here would stand up and say, but I know who is. And it's that guy over there. It's that person over there. It's that family. Or, well, I know this family. And we all know people who are rich, but we're never rich. Nobody thinks they're rich. It's always somebody else. It's always what somebody else makes. And there's always kind of that threshold. There's this imaginary kind of line, this plateau that if you could ever get there and cross over it, well, then you would be rich. And so here's why we're talking about this, and here's why we're going through a series like this, is because since you're not rich, I can talk about rich people, and nobody's going to get their toes stepped on. And hopefully I'm going to prepare you for when you are rich, because Paul actually talks about some things, and he's saying, I want you to say these things to rich people, but in other words, this applies not just to Christians and not just to non-Christians, but even people who aren't rich yet. Like, this just applies to everybody. And so one day when you are rich, I want you to be good at it. You see what I'm saying? I know you're not rich right now, but one day you may be, and I want you to be. I want you to be ridiculously rich, but I want you to be really good at being rich the way God wants you to be rich. Because He has blessed us, and He has given us an abundance. And I want you to see that and reckon, even though we're all richer than we think we are, one day when you get to the thing that you think is out there, well, if I could just double my income, well, if I could just, get that new job, if I could get out of this debt, well, then, maybe like I would consider the R word, reach the rich zone, whatever that looks like. When you get there, I want you to be good at it. Because you've known some really terrible rich people, haven't you? Like, we've all bumped into the really nasty rich persons. Like, we look at them and we're like, they're so rich, like, and they're obnoxious. I can't stand being around them. And here's some things that I've noticed about rich people, because I know, like, these are crazy things that rich people do. We don't do because we're not rich, but rich people do these things. And so I don't mind saying them, because nobody's rich in here, so we're okay with this. But you know what rich people do? I've known rich people who buy new stuff in order to replace their old stuff. It's really quiet in here. Did you know that rich people will do things like this? Like perfectly good old stuff. Like it's just kind of old, but it like works, and like they will literally go out and replace the old stuff with new stuff. I've known people who have taken out their perfectly functioning iPhone and have bought a new iPhone from their iPhone. Did you know that? Like, in order to replace the one that's in their hand, and then they, let their kids hold that, or they don't mind if it breaks because they've got the new one, and yet it was perfectly fine before me. This is what rich people do. I know, it's crazy. And then you know what else rich people will do sometimes? They'll drive their car onto the parking lot of a dealership, and then they leave it. Did you know people do this? I know. It's crazy. And then what's worse is they'll take cash and they'll leave it there as well in order for them to be able to drive off the parking lot with another car that does basically the same thing as the car before. Did you know people will do that? Like, I know. It's crazy. But rich people do this. I've even known rich people, and I know, like, it's really quiet in here, so I feel like you probably know these people, and so you're just like, out of respect, we're all just kind of being quiet, and so I get that, but it's okay. We can interact a little bit, come slap the pastor, whatever that looks like. Don't do that. But I've even known rich people who will walk into their closet, guys, girls alike. It's like nowadays it just doesn't matter, right? And they'll walk into a closet completely full of clothes with like a wall of shoes. And they'll say something like, maybe you've heard something like this, like they'll say things like, I just have, oh wait, you've heard this. You know people that have said stuff like this. I got nothing to wear. I don't know what it is. I don't have anything to wear. Have you noticed that? You know what else rich people do? Rich people will store stuff that they don't use in rooms they don't own. I'm not kidding. I know it's laughable. It's silly. But I'm not kidding. They will pay money and rent a room that they don't own, okay, in order to put stuff that they don't use or that doesn't fit in their house. Did you know this? It is crazy talk. I know. But then what happens is one day they'll just decide to sell all the old stuff because they realize, well, I'm not going to use it anymore. Like the 3 extra phones that I've accumulated. Like I realize I'm not going to actually use them. So I think I'm just going to sell them. And so they'll have attic sales and garage sales and yard sales and consignment sales. And they'll just start getting rid of stuff, in order to make room for new old stuff. I know literally that, like just to say it like that sounds so silly. And so since we're not rich, it doesn't affect us. But this is rich people behavior. Did you know that rich people will complain when they can't pour water out onto their grass? Did you know this? Like when there's like a drought and they tell you, well, you can't spray water on your grass anymore, and we complain about it. It's ridiculous. I mean, there are people in the world who have to walk miles to take like a jug of water to the house, and they just literally can't imagine, what we're doing, what these rich people are doing. Like, who could imagine that a rich person would complain about not being able to spray water on their grass? I mean, this is just rich people behavior, and I don't want us to be that way. Because what often happens is the richer we get, the more we accumulate, the more things that we have around us. Did you know that rich people actually become more and more discontent? Did you know this? Oh, well, how is that true? Like, how could that even be possible? Because like I've always just imagined having more. Like nobody in here is thinking, I think I want to take a pay cut this year. Everybody's looking for the raise, looking for the new thing, buying the lottery tickets, going to the casino. There's always, like we always want more, right? And so I can't imagine that would make me discontent, and yet it does. You know why? Because the accumulation of your stuff or wealth is like an appetite. Did you know this? The accumulation of stuff is kind of like an appetite. And what's true about all appetites? They're never fully and completely satisfied, are they? An appetite, by nature, is never fully or completely satisfied. It always comes back wanting more. And it grows the more it's fed. Isn't that true? Like, that's true. Because I got an appetite, And then it starves the more it is not fed, and it doesn't grow. But an appetite that is fed, and you know what rich people do? Rich people buy stuff. Rich people buy stuff, and the richer you are, the more stuff you are able to buy, and so you do. And so the more you feed that appetite, it's like that, you become more and more discontent. Well, it's like you're just thinking, that just doesn't make sense. That seems silly. How could that possibly be? And I don't want that to happen to you. I don't want you to become so discontent that it becomes the primary focus of your life, because I want you to be rich one day, but I want you to be so aware of this that you're really good at it, because this one sneaks up on you. We're not planning on being really discontent. We're not planning on, spending our lives accumulating things and becoming so, more and more worried about them. I actually want you to become good at being rich, so that you don't reflect back one day and think, I wish I hadn't lived that way. I wish that hadn't been such a big deal to me. I wish I hadn't, because that's, those are the people that I talk to on the other end of the spectrum. They're thinking, nobody's going back and saying, I wish I had spent more. I've never met anybody. I just wish that I had spent more in my life. I wish, now that I'm at the end of my life, I wish I'd had a bigger house. It's always relational, what you reflect back on and you wish for and what you think about. And so, while I know this doesn't apply to any of us because we're not rich, I want you to be good at rich. And so I want to walk through this, literally just one verse, but I want to break it down for us and see if there isn't something in here for each one of us. Okay, and so this letter the Apostle Paul wrote to Timothy was really getting at the heart, like especially this portion of it. And this is in chapter 6 of 1 Timothy, his first letter that he wrote to him. And he's just kind of getting at the heart of the issue. When it comes to rich people, this is what I want you to tell them. And man, there are some rich Americans that need to hear this sometimes and to take heed. And the problem is that if we don't ever think we're rich, then we'll think this never applies to us. And so just consider the possibility that we fall within the realm of rich as it is to the world's standards in comparison to the rest of the world. And maybe, just maybe, this might apply to you and me. And so listen to how he begins. He says, Timothy, command or instruct, like this is what I want you to tell people, command those who are rich in this present world, ... Like, I want you to tell them something. And can you just imagine, like had you never read this before, what is it he's going to tell rich people? Well, rich people, just, I need you to be real careful. What you have, you need to store it away and make sure you save, and you got your 401k and you got your retirement package, and, make sure that you don't, get out too quickly because you don't want to pay too much in your taxes, and, make sure you invest and you're well diversified in your portfolio. These are the kind of things you would think, rich people, this is what you need to do in order to be a good steward of your money. And yet the first thing Paul says is, command people who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant. It's like, oh, wait, how did he know? How did he know? See, Paul's saying, look, I know that it is a natural inclination for rich people, for those who continue to accumulate wealth and their lifestyle and their standard of living continues to increase. It is natural to lean in the direction of arrogance. Did you know that? You do, because you've been around people like this. You've been in situations, you've been in circles with people, and you know, like it literally doesn't have anything to do with necessarily how rich somebody is. You just have to be the richest person in the room to make this true, you know? Like, you don't have to be like crazy, athlete, superstar kind of rich. Like, just the richest person at the table or the richest person at the meeting, and all of a sudden, that person commands attention. And it's like what they say is like, more valuable somehow. It's like, how is that? Because obviously if you got to be rich, then you're smart. And we've begun to equate income with IQ. And it's like, well, obviously you were smart enough to get rich, therefore, since you're so rich, you must be real smart. And we begin to think that, because you're richer than, you must be smarter than. And as it follows, and this is deceptive and it sneaks up on us and we don't mean to do it, but the more smarter you think you are, then the better you think you are. It's just kind of the natural progression. We move toward arrogance. And he says, don't be like that. Don't be like that, America. See, we're very ethnocentric because we think, compared to everybody else in this room and in our country and different parts of the world, different parts of the country that our standard of living is much lower and we don't have as much and we've got debt and we've got bills to pay and house payment thing, we're barely keeping up and we're kind of like upside down in a mortgage payment, whatever it is. And so, therefore, we think we're so not rich that we couldn't be, this certainly wouldn't apply to us. I'm certainly not arrogant. And yet, have you ever had the thought, hey, I'm so proud to be an American? But it's not just proud to be an American, is it? It's really, I think it's better to be American. And we get that confused with proud, because it is something you should be proud of. You should be proud of any ethnicity. You should be proud of anywhere you live, anything that is yours and who you are, right? You know that. But we have a tendency to begin to move, because we're richer than we think, we begin to move toward arrogance because, well, we're richer than everybody. We have more than everybody. We're obviously smarter than everybody because we know how to dig wells and we know how to keep germs off of us and we know how to keep clean and we know how to get water, and we know how to do these things and to fix things and to heal. We know all this, and so we're smarter than, which means we're obviously better than. And while we might not say it, we definitely think it. Don't we? Do we maybe lean a little bit toward arrogance? Kind of sneaks up on us. And he's saying, don't be that way. Here's how we even know that this is true, because we have sayings like this. They've got tons of money, but you'd never know it. You ever said that? Do you know why we have statements like that? Because more often than not, it's not true. More often than not, it's not true. Most of the time, when somebody's rich. They might not get up and say it, but the way they live, they're rich. The way they act, they're rich. Or at least they think they are. And it makes them better than, and it makes them more than. It's like, well, they've got so much money, but you'd never know it. They're worth so much, but you would never know it, just because of the way they live and the way they act. They don't hold themselves in such high regard. They're not arrogant and boastful and proud and haughty. And it's like the reason we say stuff like that is because it's usually not true. It's usually the other way around. And so then he continues and he said, and this is what leads to arrogance, is essentially what he's saying. Not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain. And this is big. This is really the big idea here. I don't want you to be arrogant. And arrogance is often caused by beginning more and more to lean in the direction of putting your hope and your faith and your trust in your stuff, in your money. The accumulation of wealth, and as your standard of living increases, and as your lifestyle and your portfolio and your stuff and everything, your kind of foundation and the financial strength of who you are, as that goes up, our hope naturally, without making any decisions, without trying to, without really thinking about it, our hope begins to drift and float toward our wealth. just does. It moves in that direction. And you don't have to be a super, super rich person. You don't have to be the ultra rich person to know this is true. It just begins to drift and move in that direction. We begin to place our hope in other things. As we accumulate, and the more we get, we begin to kind of place our hope in it. It's like, I didn't even mean to do that. You know, when I was a college student, I didn't think that way at all. It was like ramen noodles and peanut butter. You know, that's all it was for me, and I was content. I was happy with that. But, you know, I got out of college, and shoot, by 30 years old, I was making more than my parents ever dreamed of making, in a bigger house than they ever dreamed of being in. And I know what's going on now. And so, like, all of a sudden, those things are what are keeping me afloat. I know, like, Sundays is the God thing, and I'm supposed to do this. I'm supposed to, you know, Jesus, hallelujah, you know, pray. But, man, Monday to Saturday, it's the grind. I got to make things happen. I got to be careful. I got to sack away. I've got to store. I've got to save, you know, until I'm safe. You know, I've got to kind of keep everything. And there's a number out there that we all think would make things okay, because we begin to put our hope in those things. The writer of Proverbs, we referred to as the richest man who ever lived. His name was King Solomon. And he was extremely wealthy, but also extremely wise. And somehow you put those things together and you become a pretty good rich person. This is what he says about wealth. The wealth of, richer than anything you've ever imagined, okay? And here's what he says. The wealth of the rich is their fortified city. They imagine it a wall too high to scale. It's like a fortified city. And you know why they imagine it? Is because it's not true. They imagine it because it's really just a vapor. They imagine it because it's really not real. They imagine it because it's really a pipe dream. They imagine that their accumulation of stuff is their stronghold. And as long as they invest correctly and wisely, and they save and they put away, and because that's what everybody told them and their parents told them, and they taught them how to save, and all that's good, and being a good steward and managing what you have. But, you know, as long as all that happens, then everything's going to be okay. And every one of you, I guarantee you, even though it might be different for each one of you, we all have a number out there. There's like this imaginary plateau that if we could just get there, well, man, if I could just, and it's not big, like most of us don't have the big dreams. You know, it's not like, oh, I need $5 million and then everything's going to be okay. Like most of us are just thinking, man, if I could just get the new job, if I could just like double my income, if like baby, you need to go back to work and then things are going to be, you know, we're going to set ourselves up. But there's like this number out there for rich people that they never quite get to, that as long as they get there, that it would create some kind of unscalable, impenetrable wall that would protect them and their family from any kind of eventuality, from any kind of possible danger. And it'll only protect them and their family, but it'll protect their kids, and it'll protect their kids' future and their kids' families, maybe even their children's children. And if I could just amass enough wealth, if I could create a strong enough foundation, then there's nothing that could get through them no matter what happened. And here's the thing. Can you imagine a number like that? Can you imagine what that would look like for you? Can you imagine what it would take for you to feel that way? To feel like your wealth is an unscalable wall, a fortified city. Can you imagine what that would be for you? Because you may be chewing on it, it's like, let me think about it, I don't know, like maybe, you know, do some calculations, you know. But I know what every person's answer is in here. You ready? You want to know what the answer is? More than you have. More than you have. Always. And I don't care how big your number is. Oh, but what about a bajillion? Oh, it doesn't matter. Well, what if I just, did everything right and I got everything paid off and yet I'm still super young and I've got, an incredibly healthy family, and what if I get all of that done? It doesn't matter. There's always more. It's always more than. As a matter of fact, you've met some rich people and you can't believe they worry about the economy. You're thinking, give me a break. Did you really whine about Obamacare? Did you really whine about how expensive health insurance is? You go on 7 vacations a year. That's what you're thinking. You just want to slap them. Did you really complain about that? You know why that happens? Because the richer you get, the more you ask the question, what if? It just is, oh, but what if this happens? I know, I've got all this stuff around me. I've got everything. I've got, the lightning-proof, waterproof, flood-proof, wind-proof house. I've got, the bunker down in the bottom full of ammo and, 7 years worth of canned goods. And I don't care who gets elected president Tuesday, and it doesn't matter to me because, man, I've taken care of myself. We're good. We're going to live down here for a few generations. So I've got so much stuff. We're good. No, nobody ever gets to that point because they're thinking, well, but what if? Well, what if? The zombie apocalypse, But what if? There's always a what if. And you've met people that are like, what if? And you just can't believe it. It's like, really? And yet we still continue to place our hope in our stuff. And we still want more. I mean, there's nobody in here that's going to walk out and go, I'm taking a pay cut this week. By choice. Nobody's going to do that. We're all thinking, yeah, but come on. You don't know my situation. I need this. I've got to get here. And I'm not even being selfish. I'm doing it for my family. This is what I need to do. This is what I've been taught to do. This is what is safe. And this is what is good and right. Maybe so. And you might convince me otherwise. But I just want you to consider for a second that even though you're not rich, that maybe your hands have begun to close a little bit. And your hope has begun to drift toward your wealth and your stuff. Is it a possibility that could happen even on this side of rich? And then he continues and he says, but instead of that, instead of putting their hope in wealth, you need to command them to put their hope in God. Oh, that is so cliche. You know, pastors, preachers, they get a lot of criticism about talking about money, don't they? I mean, it is true. God, you may be one of them. It's like, I cannot believe I showed up here and they're talking about money. This is why I left the church 10 years ago, because they always talk about money. And regardless of what your experience is, regardless of what you heard or what has maybe poorly been presented to you or your perception of the church and when it comes to money, but do you know why we end up talking about money a good bit? And really not as much as perhaps we should, but do you know why? Because Jesus did. When you read through the gospel accounts, the 4 gospel accounts, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you will find real quickly that Jesus literally talks about money and wealth and treasure way more often than he even talks about heaven and hell. Did you know that? Like your eternity. He talks about wealth in this life more than he talks about eternity. Isn't that interesting? Why is that? Because he knows your eternity just may be affected by how you handle your wealth in this life. Why is that? Because he knows your heart follows what you put your hope in. Your heart follows what you put your hope in. God does not need nor want your moolah. Did you know that? I don't care what a preacher has said to you. It is not about, reaping and sowing, and if you bless, then you will be blessed. Forget that for now. Did you know that your heart follows where you put your hope? And so if your hope is primarily in the stuff that you surround yourself with, and in your job, and in your career, and in your potential future, did you know that there your heart will be also? That's what Jesus said. Where your treasure is, what you treasure most, what you think about most, what you give your attention to, what you put your hope in, is where your heart will be also. Did you know that? That's why it matters how you handle being rich. Because God doesn't care about your money, he cares about your heart, and he wants your heart. God knows that wealth ultimately will become a substitute for him. It just will. It becomes a substitute. And it's not like a both and. I mean, Jesus himself said you can't serve 2 masters. I mean, you've heard that. You just can't serve 2 masters. You will either love the one and despise the other, or vice versa. And he said you can't serve 2 masters. You can only substitute one for the other. You can't have both. Oh, but really? You tell me I can't be rich? Nope. Didn't say that. You didn't hear it. You tell me I got to give everything away? Nope. I'm telling you that what God has blessed you with, you need to be good at. If he makes you rich, then be good at being rich. And don't put your hope in everything in your future in that. And we'll get to a little litmus test on what that may look like for us in just a second. But this is the way he wraps this up. He says, put their hope in God. Remind them to put their hope in God, who richly provides. In other words, there's a provider who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Isn't that interesting? He gives you what you have for your enjoyment. It's like, I knew it. It's that money series, money talk, and they're going to tell me I'm supposed to give everything away and be miserable. You know, he gives you what you have so that you can enjoy it. He wants you to enjoy this life. He wants to redeem everything about your life. He wants to redeem you. I think he would make you abundantly crazy, just stupid wealthy if he knew you would manage it well. If he knew you wouldn't put all your hope in that. If he knew that your heart wouldn't drift in its direction. Because he knows hope has a tendency to float and to move around. He doesn't want that to happen. He wants your heart. And he wants you to stay focused on him. So, question being, I want you to consider today, is where is your heart? Because we're all on this side of rich right now, right? Because we've already established that. Nobody here is rich. So then where is your heart? It's like, I don't know. Like, how am I supposed to know? Like, how can I tell? Because, like, I'm a pretty good person, you know. Like, I come to church, I give, you know, occasionally. Like, is that good? Okay. And those are maybe some indicators. But here's maybe a good way. And these are going to be, like, really extreme statements. But I'm going to put a couple of statements on the screen, and then I just want you to consider which of these statements makes you more anxious. Okay? If you can just, like, imagine with me, it's going, you're going to have to put on your thinking hat. Like, use your imagination. Which of these statements would make you more anxious? Here's the first one. There is no God. There is no God. Like, you get to the end of your life, and with certainty, you realize there's nothing. Like it didn't matter what you believed or what you did, or like there's just nothing, and you know it. Like, there is nothing. There's no after. There's nobody waiting on you, to walk you through the pearly gate. Like, there's nothing. There is no God, and it's almost as if you never existed at all. Like, there's no purpose to anything. You just didn't exist. And so, consider that. Or consider the second statement. You have no money. And I mean have no money, not like you think you have no money. I'm talking like literally zero. All you have is the shirt on your back. No house, no car, no nothing, no cash, no assets, nothing you can buy, nothing you can sell. Zero, nothing. And you cannot get it back, ever. It make you a little anxious, like to even imagine what that might be like? Like zero. Because maybe it's like, okay, that makes me feel a little guilty because like I think I'm supposed to like be more concerned about this one, but if I'm being honest, I'm really okay. So now I want you to take those two statements and picture this scenario. Okay, you're in the hospital, hooked up to all those machines that you don't want to be hooked up to. Nobody does, and you have just been given just a very short time to live. Like, it's terminal, and the end is on the horizon. It's coming. Okay? Now, which statement do you care about more? Well, I got no money, and I can't get any money, and I don't have a lot of time left anyway. So, I'm thinking about the God part. Because now you're hoping that there's something else. Now you're hoping there's really more to this life than just this life, right? I mean, I guarantee you, every person you bump up against, every person you meet is going to be more concerned about eternity at that point and the hope that maybe there is a God out there at the end of their life than they are about the fact that they don't have any money, because they know that that's not going with them anyway. So now all that matters at that point is like, I just want to know that there's something else. I don't want my life not to have counted. So here's the question. If you're going to think about and put your hope in God at the end, when you have no more control and life is at its end, then doesn't it make sense to also put your hope in Him in the middle? when you also don't have a whole lot of control over what happens? Because He's the one that provides what we have anyway. And if we really believe that, if we say, well, yeah, I put my hope in God, and He is my provider, what sense, honestly, let's be real honest, what sense does it make to put your hope in what He has provided and not the one who provided it? So I think this is kind of our bottom line today. Don't. Don't put your hope in what is provided when you can put your hope in the one who provides. Don't put your hope in what is provided when you can put your hope, when you have an opportunity to put your faith and your hope and your trust in the one who provides to begin with. Isn't that interesting? Like, well, I'm not real sure what to do with that. And you're wondering, like, that kind of makes me feel bad. And thank you so much. So glad I came to church today. But no worries. You'll have to come back next week. And we're going to talk about really how that goes, a very practical way of how we can actually do some of this, of how we can live this way, how we can be really good at being rich with what we have and to steward it well. And to give us a lot of freedom, even with a lot of stuff, and to free ourselves from feeding that appetite. We'll talk about that next week, but here's where I want to leave you today. I want you to consider where your heart is today, before you're super wealthy and rich, on this side. Because I bet you're richer than you think. And you can. You can walk out of this room, it's your prerogative. You can walk out of this room and never live this way at all. Never think another thing about it. You can walk away, live the rest of your life on a tear to accumulate and to get and to gather and to secure, and you can continue. I'm just going to save my way to safety and protection, and I'm going to continue to get. And here's the thing: you're gonna reach some moments and some plateaus and some areas of life where you're thinking, I think I got there, or I hit that goal, or I hit that mark. There's gonna be some mile markers in there that feel really good, and maybe you sold a company, or maybe you finally got promoted, or you got made partner, or came into some inheritance money, or whatever it is, and got rid of some debt, and like everything was good. Like you're gonna hit some of those moments, like you are, and that was some gloom and doom, right? That's like, well, I don't have nothing. Like you're probably never gonna have to make that statement or make that call, and so the burden is much more difficult then to really live this way, and you don't have to. And you can get to the end of your life, and you know what? You can literally have lived your entire life for yourself, making every decision for yourself, accumulating as much as you could for yourself, putting all of your hope in your stuff for yourself and for your family, for the entirety of your life. And you can get to the end of your life, and you can honestly say, God, I realize that there is something that goes beyond this life, and I want to put my hope and my trust in you now. I know I haven't lived that way before, but I want to now. And you know what? God is gracious, and He is forgiving, and He is faithful, and He will do that. But you know what's not going to happen? Is He's not going to send you back in time and give you those first 5 years of marriage again. Those first few years of being a parent, those first few years of being a grandparent. He's not going to give like a do-over. There's forgiveness, there's grace, but no do-overs. And you're going to realize that now there's a pattern of life, there's a way that you live that caused more regret than joy. And while in the midst of it, it's like, yeah, but baby, you just got to know, like, this is where I am. Like, you may not sacrifice wealth for anything, but you will sacrifice relationship at some point along the way. You will. In your pursuit of accumulation, you will sacrifice relationship. And your kids are going to look at you, and you're going to say, baby, look, this is just the way it is. I'm doing this for you, honey. I'm doing this for you. And they're going to look at you and go, no, you're not. You're doing it for you. If you were doing it for me, then you would spend time with me. Oh, but it's just a few years. It's just while I know I'm only young once, Dad. I'm only young once, Mom. You're not getting this back again. Your wife, your husband is going to say, this isn't about us. This is about you and your pursuit. This is about you. And you won't be able to go back and fix those things. Forgiveness, but no do-overs. And so where is your heart today on this side of Rich? Where's your heart? It's worth considering. Who has your heart? Has your heart begun to move you in the direction of placing your hope in your future, in your security, in your stuff? Let me pray for us. Heavenly Father, I pray that you would help us discover what is true about our stuff, and that it's just what you have given us to steward and to manage. You've given it to us for our enjoyment, but you want us to be good at it, and not good at it for ourselves. You want us to handle it your way. For some of you in here, that may mean just making that first step and saying, okay, so I realize I've never given my heart to God. I've never even thought about that. I've never done that. And that may be the first step for you, thinking, that sounds really good, and I'm not really sure where my heart is right now, but I know it's not with God. So I want to give you an opportunity to make that confession right now and to begin and to allow what he wants to do in you. And you can pray with me. Heavenly Father, I give you my heart. Maybe for the first time, I give you my heart. I want my hope to be in you. I'm a smart person. I know that my future ultimately does not rest in my wealth or in my status or in my stuff. My hope is in you. And I want to know that there is something more to this life than just this life. Would you teach me day by day to be open-handed so that my heart stays open to you?